Podcasting from the great city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, this is the TeacherCast Podcast. Hello everyone, this is Jeff Bradbury, and welcome to the TeacherCast Podcast number 11 from teachercast.net. Today we are very proud and honored to have with us a special guest on our show today. He's the director of the Department of Education from the great state of Iowa. Jason Glass, welcome to the TeacherCast Podcast.
Hi, Jeff. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the chance to be on your show.
Well, thank you for joining us. This is such a treat. You actually, I don't know if you remember, you actually earned this honor by becoming the 100th Twitter follower for the TeacherCast Twitter site.
Well, it's one of the few things I've won in my life, but what an honor to get sort of a two-for-one treat, to get to be the 100th follower and to get to be on your show. So lucky me.
Well, thank you for being on today. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're the Director of Education for the state of Iowa.
Sure.
How does that work?
Yeah, well, each state has a state director in some form. Some states call them commissioners. Some states call it superintendent, state superintendent. In some states, it's the Secretary of Education. Here in Iowa, it's the state director. So I'm Iowa's chief state school officer. And so I work as the sort of executive director of the State Department of Education. Here, that's the Iowa Department of Education. And I also work just to advocate for education issues in the state and to put together policy approaches for where we think the state should go, how we improve schools in Iowa to be the best they can for the kids that we have here. So that's what I do now. I've only been in Iowa for about 8 months now. I moved here in January. And I was living in Ohio before, working for a nonprofit there called Battelle for Kids. And with Battelle for Kids, I was doing Race to the Top work in Tennessee and Ohio, mostly around what we called human capital strategies. It's all about human capital strategies are all about how you improve the people working in schools, either through selection, hiring, training, supports, compensation. So there's a variety of ways to get at that. And so we sort of took the kitchen sink approach to improving the people working in schools. Before that, I lived in Colorado. I was out there for about 10 years. I was the HR director with a school district up in the mountains called Eagle County Schools, which that was a real pioneer district in some of these human capital approaches. I was the HR director there, and before that, I was the assessment director. I lived in Denver for 6 years and worked for the Colorado Department of Education there in several different roles, mostly around kids with disabilities and assessments. And I worked for a nonprofit there in Denver on early childhood education issues. And before that, I grew up in Kentucky. I was a high school social studies teacher. My parents are both teachers. My sister is a teacher. My brother works for Kentucky Educational Television. My wife's a teacher here in Des Moines. So this is sort of the family business for us. So it's a big honor to get to come back and work in a place like Iowa with just a huge and tremendous, long-standing tradition of excellence in education. So, in I guess about 50 seconds, hopefully, that was my bio.
Wow. So you've really been around the country and getting the chance to see all the different types of educational systems that we have set up here. Where would you say that we are in the country right now? What is the state of education?
Yeah, well, there's a McKinsey & Company report that came out last year that did a great job talking about the condition of the world in education. And they sort of looked at where are countries that are moving from basically no education system at all, or they called poor, to average or mediocre. Where are places that are moving from mediocre to good? Where are places that are moving from good to great? And where are places that are moving from great to excellent? And so I think using that sort of framework from that McKinsey & Company report, I'd say that most schools in the United States, we're in that somewhere in that good to great realm. We're certainly have schools in place in just about every community in the country. We have systems to get kids into school. We do a good job providing some equity in terms of access to every kid in the United States. So those are all real strengths, and arguably we have some screens around quality in the educator workforce. So those are strengths here too. But are we one of the top performing school systems in the world? Well, the evidence would say that we're not right now. We're outperformed by several other countries around the world. And what some of the work that I think we have to do in the United States now is look at what are some of the strategies those other high performing systems are using, and think about which of those make sense in the United States. What can we put in place to really accelerate this country in moving past that good to great to really being an excellent school system all across the country?
Are you noticing around the country, or at least around Iowa, that our schools are moving forward with our development, or are we kind of stagnant right now, or where are we as far as advancing, our students today?
Sure, I think there is there's a little bit of a culture war going on in education right now, politically. 30 years ago or so, the countries that are now the highest performing systems in the world, which would be the Finland, Singapore, South Korea, a couple of Canadian provinces. These countries all took our playbook. They took the United States system, adopted it, put it in place, and then went about a 20 to 30 year long effort to take that playbook and expand on it and grow it. And they have accelerated up now past the United States. Now, certainly arguments can be made that some of these places don't have the poverty issues or the social equity issues that the United States has, and that's certainly true. But I'd sort of counter that to say, are there good ideas that we can learn from these other high-performing systems? And certainly there are. There are things that they're doing around how selective they are in their educator workforce, for example, that we absolutely should be learning from that. When we look around the country now, there's this culture war going on about kind of education reformers on one side who are arguing public schools are a disaster and a disgrace, and we need to close them and privatize them and hold educators more accountable, and it's all about tests and removing ineffective educators and evaluating people. So that sort of side is out there. And on the other side of that debate is a group of really, I'd characterize them as hardcore status quo defenders who say our schools are fine, just give us more money and leave us alone. And I think both of these arguments actually set up a false dichotomy for us, because our schools are a tremendous resource to this country. They're part of what's made this country great. We should be proud of them. We should honor the educators that work in them, but we should care about quality too. And there are ways that our schools can get better. What we're trying to do here in Iowa is find a way to walk that third path. Can we acknowledge, honor the educators that we have working and the great things that our schools have done for us in the past, but also say there are clearly some ways that our schools can get better, and think about how we adopt some of those ideas from the highest performing systems and put them in place across Iowa and hopefully across the country.
Now, when we look at education, there's so many different battlegrounds that we talk about, teachers versus parents versus students versus administrators versus, the political landscape these days. Is this something that you see America actually digging themselves out of, or do you feel that education is just going to stay buried in the political battles that we've been having in the last couple of years, especially with 2012 coming up?
Yeah, well, a great question, and I think it begins by having conversations. The way that you sort of set up the question illustrates, I think, a fundamental problem with the way maybe we as Americans or we as human beings approach problems. It's always an us versus them configuration, and it doesn't have to be. We should think about that really all of these groups that you mentioned, parents, community leaders, teachers, administrators, unions, school boards, politicians, policymakers, taxpayers, all of us have an interest in better schools. All of us want great schools, want a great education for our kids. And so I think we can sometimes get caught up in the us versus them dichotomies and instead think about that there are really a lot of things that we can stand together on, and let's start with that. And some of the issues that are more divisive, for example, around say teacher dismissal or teacher compensation or charter schools or virtual online schools. These are things that kind of get people's hackles up. Instead of saying no to any of these or trying to cram some version of it down somebody's throat, again us versus them paradigm. let's think about if quality really is our outcome, if having a high quality system is our outcome, how do all those discussions figure into leading us toward high quality, and how can they be done well, how can they be done right, and in ways that respect the teaching profession and lift up the teaching profession, try and improve it. So I think we should just avoid the us versus them dichotomies, and we should try to find the places that we can stand together, and always with the idea that we want a high quality education for every kid as our outcome, and let all the decisions fall from that.
I think when it comes down to it, and all the grapes fall off the tree, I think everybody has the same idea, which is students first, student-centered, getting the best education out there, leading our country out the way. What would you say would be the typical high school graduate? If you could live in a perfect world and say a high school graduate is, how would you finish that sentence?
Yeah, well, I think the way you answer the question depends a lot on your values. Some folks would say, employable, ready for college or career options. So that's sort of the economic side of that debate. We want to make sure that our kids are going to have jobs, and the prosperity of the country is bound up with that as well. Another value system would say that we want kids to be advocates for social justice and be good citizens, be good people. Another value system on it would say we want our students to be creative, we want them to be communicative, we want them to be collaborative, we want them to be able to work together with other people and build beautiful things. And it's hard to argue that any of those things aren't important. So I think what I would say is that what we want our high school graduates to look like is well-rounded, well-meaning, decent, employable people. And so, again, I think we have to push against these dichotomies of we have to choose academics versus creativity. You have to choose both, because academics without any creativity is just memorization and spewing out facts, and we don't need that. Creativity without an academic grounding is just chaos. Character without an academic grounding is just dogma. So we have to think in more sophisticated ways, that we really should be trying to think about how do we get kids to grow into well-rounded human beings, and it's a complete package. It's not just one thing or the other. And all of these things are important, and we have to emphasize quality across the board.
Nice, very nice, very well put too. So, tell me about your typical week, actually, Jason. I mean, you go around, you visit schools, you have a chance to talk to the teachers, the students. What are some of the things that you guys get to do over there in Iowa? Yeah,
well, it's a great job, and this is the greatest job in the world, to be the state director, especially in a state like Iowa, with the kind of tradition that we have here. So it's just been an incredible honor for me. But I'm an appointed position. The governor appoints me here, so the governor can decide tomorrow that he wants somebody else, and I'll go post my resume on Monster, I guess. But typically, it may surprise people. I actually do what feels like a lot of campaigning, because what I'm trying to do is advocate for schools in Iowa, and advocate for what I think is the best thing for schools in Iowa. And to do that, I have to convince the educators, the parents, the students, the policymakers, the legislators, the governor, the business community. I have to convince them that my vision is the right one. So I spend a lot of time talking to people, spend a lot of time going out and meeting as many people as I can. I go and visit schools, talk to educators, learn from them, listen to them, and a lot of civic groups. I spend a lot of time doing that. Spend a lot of time also just working through the day-to-day functions of the Department of Education. Right now, the department is mostly configured around sort of a compliance monitoring view of, we hold districts and schools accountable for how they spend their money, and are they serving kids in compliance with the law. And that's always going to be important, and we constantly have issues like that I have to dig into and find answers to. But I'm really pushing this department, and it's really been great to see how the people here have responded to this charge, but really push them to think of themselves as not bean counters, not accountants, not fact checkers, but leaders. And leadership means that you confront. Leadership to me means that you confront important problems in creative ways. And that doesn't mean just following a checklist. So I've challenged the people here to, if you're working on something that's not important, then it's not leadership. And if you're not challenging an important problem in a creative new way, that's not leadership either.
So with all of your travels throughout your school districts, Jason, are you seeing teachers embracing technology, or are they more shying away from it?
I think, Jeff, I'm seeing both. And I think it's important that we recognize that the technology isn't a magic bullet. It isn't a panacea. It's not something that's going to cure all the problems in education, but it does present an opportunity for us to expand teaching and learning in different ways than we have before. One of the great things going on here in Iowa is we have about 100 districts now that are in some level of what we call our one-to-one initiative, or they have a laptop or a device for every kid in the school, and mostly that's going from grades kind of 5 and up. And that was really pushed and pressed by a university professor here we had named Scott McLeod, who's just a tremendous leader for the state. But as we've seen that effort grow around the state, we've seen teachers and kids learn to explore and use the technology and devices in ways that they didn't even think was possible when we first started. But we have also seen educators and kids really struggle with it too. And the initial first step is really we're just sort of cramming paper down wire. We're not really doing anything different. It's just delivering worksheets through a digital format. But what we see is after a year or two, that once the kids and the educators start to understand the capabilities, we see connectivity, interaction, access of content that is sort of exponentially better than what we've had in the past. So I think we're struggling with this new innovation right now, but I see it taking hold, and we're really just scratching the surface of what the capabilities are.
With TeacherCast, we're fortunate enough to have a lot of good teachers coming on the program, as well as administrators. And it seems like we kind of have this little yin and yang. You either have a budget problem where you're constantly paying for new RAM and upgrading your computers and netbooks and laptops and iPads, or the flip side is your school isn't technology oriented and you're paying for things like paper and ink and copy machines. Where do you see us going, and how can we work within a shrinking budget that all schools are having right now?
Yeah, well, I think it's a priority question, and it's an inevitable move question too. I mean, the move toward digital devices, an electronic landscape of content and interaction between student to student, student to teacher, teacher to parent, student to parent, that move is going to happen. And so we have to decide: are we going to be John Henry? The old story of the guy who tried to beat a rail laying machine with how fast he could do it by hand, and he did beat the rail laying machine, but he actually killed himself doing it because the machine just keeps coming and keeps getting better. So we have to decide: are we going to be education technologies John Henry? Or are we going to keep trying to get in front of this problem? When really the transition is going to be inevitable, and we have to think about how we make the move. So, if we stop buying textbooks and we stop putting in computer labs, the economies of this have just about gotten to the point now that you can go to a one-to-one device for every kid for about the same price. So we're just about at that tipping point now, and that's just going to continue to move in that direction. So I think the change is inevitable over to the digital side, but I think we do have to be cautious and thoughtful about how we make this move and how we keep teaching and learning at the forefront of the conversation.
And when you say one-to-one device, what is that one-to-one device? Is it a desktop? Is it a notebook? Is it an iPad? What are you seeing schools embrace these days?
Sure, all of that, plus smartphones. And who knows what the next thing that's going to be invented is. So all of these are options that we see out there. They all have different strengths and weaknesses. But the important thing is you want to. What we see happening is kids are having a device that allows them access to the internet and therefore access to the world. And that brings in good and bad things. And so part of what our responsibility is as educators is helping kids understand that there are good and bad things out there. And when they leave our schools, they're going to interact with a world with good and bad things out there. And we need to be preparing them for the digital world, not just the world that was our past, the educators' past. Well, we have to think about what is their future going to be like, and their future involves a digital presence in a digital world. So we have a responsibility, I think, to educate kids about how to use these devices, whatever format they take on.
You know, I assume that you're in good communication with the other directors of education throughout the country, right?
Well, we have a national organization called the Council of Chief State School Officers. So, yes.
And where, at your level, where are you guys with the idea of cell phones in classes? I've had people come on and say cell phones are bad, they're this and that. My personal philosophy is I don't call it a cell phone, I call it an internet device. Because right on, in front of them, the kid can do anything that they want to, probably better than the desktop that's sitting in their room. But we're not allowed to let those kids bring those cell phones that have like calculators on them into their SAT classes. Where do you see us going with personal devices like this?
Well, I see the current state is all over the place on it, but mostly fear-based and reactive of saying let's keep them out. Out of fear of their misuse or their abuse, or even in places that try to do it, the underuse of them. So, I mean, these devices are just a tool. They're just an implement to get to an end. And so, any tool can be misused, it can be abused, and it can be underused. And so, it's all about the way you use it. I think again, it's an inevitable place that we're going to get to where these devices are so ubiquitous; they're just everywhere, and so we might as well think about how we can harness their capabilities rather than trying to build up walls to keep them out. Because we're just not going to keep them out. So we have to start thinking about how we engage in using these in productive ways. Kids shouldn't have to surrender technology and go back 20 years in terms of technological advancements when they enter the school building. So we have to think about how do we keep teaching and learning primary in our approaches, but also think about how we capture and use the capabilities that these devices bring.
And piggybacking onto that, let's go into one of our hot topics that we like to talk about here on the podcast is social media. We have things like Facebook, Twitter, Google+. Where are you on all of these things? Should teachers and school districts be using social media to connect with the community?
Well, sure, absolutely. And again, these all present an avenue, an opportunity for people to connect and learn from each other. I mean, there is certainly a dark side to this, and the downside, the abuses of this with sexual predators or unethical educators who are taking advantage of kids. That's out there. It's actually worse than any of us can even imagine. I mean, we should just come out and say that the potential to abuse these things is worse than any of us could even make up in like an episode of Law and Order or something. The reality far exceeds the fiction in terms of how bad these things can be. But they also bring us tremendous opportunity. And I think we're going to have kids. We're going to increasingly have educators that have an online digital presence via Facebook or Twitter or a blog site or any number of other things that haven't even been invented yet. And so what we have to do is think about how do ethics translate to the digital side? How does character translate to the digital side? So again, how do we harness the capabilities of all these connectivity options while at the same time trying to educate kids and educators and the community and parents on their dangers? So we want to create safe, nurturing environments where kids can thrive, but also harness the capabilities that these devices and all these social media options that you've mentioned bring us.
Do you feel that we should still be teaching some of the basic things in school? I mean, there was a big argument over, some of the states are trying to ban cursive writing. Where are you on things like, should we be teaching long division, cursive handwriting, all these older skills?
Sure. Well, I think there's a balance here. So, at some point, the old way of doing things doesn't make sense to learn anymore. Like Jeff, I don't know exactly what your age is, but I'm guessing that we may be of the generation that we may be of the last generation that knows what VHF and UHF was. So, the kids that are growing up now have no idea what VHF and UHF meant or means. And it's going to become obsolete information. This is stuff that's not going to be necessary for people to know in the future. And so I think as we think about content and what kids should be learning, we constantly have to be thinking about what kids are going to need for their future, not what kids are going to need from our past. And that's a lens that we have to constantly look at in terms of our content and what we're teaching. And that's a broader question than this technology versus not technology question. That's a question of content, standards, curriculum, and instruction, that we should always be going through all of those levels of our curriculum and always be having a forward-looking view of what are our kids going to need in their future.
Very nice. So when you're walking around school and when you're, doing all your meetings, I assume you have an iPad?
I do have an iPad. I carry an iPad, I carry a Droid phone, and I carry a BlackBerry. And my BlackBerry is my work phone. My Droid is my personal phone, and my iPad is I use it for email and browsing and Twitter. And then I have a little MiFi device that I take with me everywhere, just so I can get connected to the internet anywhere I go. So I'm a fairly tech-savvy person, fairly connected in person, and it really, I think, enables me to be a much more effective state director for the state, because I can direct and stay synced in with so many more things than if I just relied on email and the phone.
Are you a Mobile Me user?
I'm not a Mobile Me user. I haven't gotten into that yet.
I have to ask that question. One of the guys that I work with is a big Mobile Me person, and whenever we get together and we podcast, we always have a Mobile Me rant of it's leaving us. Oh my goodness, we don't have that gallery feature. So I have to ask all of my guests. Just in wrapping up here, give us your top 4 or 5 apps that you like to use, personal, business wise. I love talking to administrators about what apps they use in their school, but I'm always curious to know what kind of fun things do you like to do with your technology.
Sure. Well, I'm a big Twitter user, and so I correspond with educators all over the state, all over the country, using that. So that's been a great way to connect with Iowans, and we actually have a huge number of Iowans that are using that. So I use that. I don't do Facebook, and the reason is that you have to kind of pick which ones of these you want to pay attention to. You can get overwhelmed with this stuff and just lose track of what the things you should be working on. So I have to pay attention to email because it's just part of how business is done now, and so I pay attention to that. I pay attention to Twitter, and I keep an active Twitter account because I want to stay connected in with people, and I use it as a sort of technological professional learning community. I'm always sharing and gathering resources from that, ideas, links, stories from Twitter. I keep a personal blog site as well, and really that's been a powerful tool here because it's changed the dynamic of how I interact with the media, how I think state directors of education can interact with the media. And by that I mean I am no longer dependent on the newspaper or the television news to get my message out. I can use the internet to push out my own news, my own stories, and have my own voice heard. So that's changed the power dynamic some with the media about who gets to tell what story. And I also use all the typical productivity tools that I think most people would use: spreadsheets, word processing, browsers, those sorts of things. But I would say I primarily spend my time on Twitter, my blog, in fact, a lot of face-to-face conversations still, and email.
Do you guys have any special iPad apps that are made directly for government jobs?
I don't have any in particular. I use Evernote quite a bit. I put speeches on it. I grab ideas, type them into that. I grab PDF files, links, throw them into that, and it's just kind of a catch-all for me. So Evernote's a great tool that I use, and I also use it for my shopping list too. So there's some more mundane uses of that as well. And I'm really interested in with the Common Core standards that have come out in reading and English language arts. I'm starting to see some really good applications come out around for teachers around what are those standards at different grade levels and different strands, and where teachers can really drill down and find out what those standards are. And then I see the next iteration of that being, here's fourth grade reading, here's some expectations, and then even going further to say here's some model lessons or ideas that could be linked into that too. So I see the capabilities of applications for unpacking our Common Core curriculum just expanding too.
Nice. Well, Jason, it's been an honor and absolutely a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Hey, Jeff, I really appreciated getting the opportunity to do it. It's been really fun, and I wish you the best in your endeavor with TeacherCast. I think it's a great idea, and I just want to shout it from the rooftops, and let's get this thing to spread. It's exciting.
Oh, thank you very much. We always give you guys an opportunity to tell us how to find you guys. What's your website? What's your blog? What's your Twitter?
I'm at educateiowa.gov. That's the Department of Education's website. My personal blog is just Education Elements, and so I think if you just Google Education Elements, that's my personal blog site. My Twitter handle is Jason Glass, first name, last name, Jason Glass, and then IA is in Iowa. So Jason Glass IA is my Twitter handle, and I'm a follow you back kind of guy. So anybody that follows me, and if I can determine that you're not some kind of fake machine or marketing guru seem to be thousands of them out there, I will follow you back as long as I think you're a real person. So please, I'm always looking for more people to connect with and talk education and try to make this the most important issue in our country. So look forward to connecting with people on there.
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you very much for being on here. And thank you for listening to the TeacherCast podcast. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, teachercast.net, to your friends and colleagues. We can be found on Twitter at the screen name TeacherCast. Be sure to check out our iTunes channel for TeacherCast podcasts, app reviews, and other blogs that are beneficial to you, the 21st century educator. If you like what you heard, please write us a great review and give us a 5-star rating. This has been a TeacherCast production. Join us next time for another edition of the TeacherCast podcast.